A man named Curtis called me on a Tuesday morning in late November. He had been trying to call for 3 weeks, he said. He had gotten as far as dialing twice before hanging up. The third time, he let it ring. He said he was not sure what had changed on Tuesday morning specifically. He said maybe nothing had changed, and he had just finally run out of reasons to hang up. He was 67 years old. He lived in Scottsdale, Arizona. He had made his money in commercial real estate development in the Phoenix metro area, starting in the late 1980s and building through the 90s and 2000s into something substantial. He did not tell me the number in the first 5 minutes. He told me the number later, the way men who have money tell you the number, not to impress, but because the number is part of the story, and leaving it out would be a kind of dishonesty, the comfortable kind. He said he had cleared just over $5 million in net personal assets by the time he stepped back from active development at 58. He said it in the flat tone of a man reporting a weather event that happened to someone else. He had a son named Marcus. Marcus was 38 years old. He lived in Portland, Oregon, with his wife and a daughter named Simone, who was 4. Curtis had met Simone twice. Once at the hospital the week she was born, and once at Christmas 2 years ago. He had held her for approximately 20 minutes total in 4 years of her life. He said, "I made $5 million, and I missed my son's entire childhood. And now I am watching myself miss my granddaughter's childhood. And I called you because I cannot figure out how a man does this twice." I asked him to tell me about Marcus first. He said Marcus had been born in 1986. Curtis was 29. He had been married for 3 years to a woman named Diane, who he described as a woman who had understood from the beginning what she was marrying into and had loved him anyway, and had eventually, correctly, stopped accepting it as the permanent arrangement of her life. But that came later. In 1986, Marcus arrived, and Curtis had been, he said, genuinely moved by it. He had stood in the hospital and held his son, and felt something he did not have the vocabulary for at 29, a feeling of scale, of the world rearranging around a new fact. He had thought, holding Marcus that first night, "This is the thing. Whatever I have been building toward, this is it." He had then gone back to work 5 days later. His biggest deal of the year was closing in 3 weeks, and he could not afford to be distracted. He had told himself this. He had believed it. He had gone back to work. He described the years that followed with a precision that suggested he had spent considerable time organizing the accounting of them. Marcus's first steps, he had not been there. He had heard about them from Diane by phone, standing in a parking lot in Tempe after a meeting. Marcus's first day of kindergarten, he had dropped him off, which he had made a point of, had taken a photograph in front of the school, and had been in a meeting by 8:15. Marcus's Little League years, from age 7 to 11, Curtis had attended perhaps a third of the games, which he had at the time considered a reasonable percentage for a man building something, and which he now understood was a third. Marcus's middle school years. Curtis had been present in the house, but not in the room, the way he had been present in the house, but not in the room for most of Marcus's childhood. A man who was physically located in a building, while existing primarily in the financial architecture of deals that were always about to close. He said Diane had told him things. Many times, in many ways, across many years, she had told him things. She had the same conversation Beverly's husband would have recognized, that Philip's wife Carolyn would have recognized, that all the women married to building men have over and over in different kitchens and different decades. The words change, but the sentence is always the same. "You are here, but you are not here. I need you to be here." He had heard it. He had not been able to make the information stick. Diane had filed for divorce when Marcus was 14. Curtis had been, in some way he could not fully explain, surprised. He had known the marriage was struggling. He had known Diane was unhappy. He had known these things the way you know things you have decided not to address, fully, usefully, from a distance. The papers arriving had still felt like a surprise. The way a storm you have watched approaching can still surprise you when it finally arrives. Marcus had stayed with Diane in Phoenix. Curtis had moved to Scottsdale. He had continued to build, which was what he knew how to do, with a feeling he could not manage any other way. The $5 million had accumulated through Marcus's high school years and his years at Arizona State and his move to Portland at 24 for a job in urban planning that Curtis had initially considered a modest ambition for a developer's son, and which he had later understood was Marcus choosing, deliberately, a life that did not resemble his father's in any particular. He said the estrangement had not happened dramatically. It had happened gradually, the way estrangements often happen. Not a door slammed, but a door left open that slowly, over years, swings closed. Marcus had called less. Curtis had not pursued the calls with the energy they required. There had been Christmases that happened and Christmases that did not. There had been a period of about 3 years when Marcus was in his late 20s, when they had spoken perhaps 4 times. Curtis had told himself Marcus was busy establishing himself. He had not asked whether Marcus was also in the process of deciding how much of his father to include in his adult life. He had not asked because he had been afraid of the answer. Then Marcus had met a woman named Claire. They had married in 2017. Curtis had attended the wedding and had felt, sitting in the 3rd row watching his son at the altar, something that had arrived too late to be useful, but arrived anyway. A full, clear recognition of how much he had missed and what the missing had cost both of them. He had given a toast at the reception. He had prepared it for 2 weeks. He had stood up at the microphone and talked about Marcus's qualities, his steadiness, his integrity, his ability to see people clearly, and had said these things as though he was describing a man he knew well and had known, speaking them, that he was describing a man he had mostly missed the construction of. That Marcus had built himself, in large part, in Curtis's absence. That the qualities Curtis was praising had been formed not with his help, but around his absence, the way a tree grows around a wound. Claire had told him, at the reception, quietly and without malice, that Marcus had spent a lot of years hoping his father would show up differently. She said it the way a woman says something she has decided is necessary to say and has chosen her moment carefully. She said Marcus didn't talk about it much, but she knew it was there. Curtis had thanked her. He had not known what else to say. Simone had been born in 2020. Curtis had driven to Portland the week she arrived. He had stood in the hospital room and held her the way he had held Marcus 34 years earlier, in a hospital in Phoenix, and had felt the same thing, the rearranging, the scale of a new fact, the sense that whatever he had been building toward, this was it. And then he had driven back to Scottsdale. He had visited once more at Christmas of 2022. 2 days. He had held Simone for 20 minutes across those 2 days, and had watched her move around the living room of Marcus and Claire's house, and had thought about Marcus at the same age, moving around a house Curtis had mostly been absent from. He had watched Marcus with Simone, the way Marcus got down on the floor with her, the way he tracked her attention, the way he was fully in the room with her and nowhere else. And he had felt something he described to me as recognition. He said he had watched his son be the father he had not been, and had understood that Marcus had not learned it from him. That Marcus had become present by deciding, at some level, to be the opposite of what he had been given. He said after that Christmas visit, he had gone back to Scottsdale and had not returned to Portland. Not because he had decided not to, because the visits required a conversation that kept not happening. A conversation between him and Marcus that both of them knew needed to happen, and neither of them had initiated, that lived in the space between them like a debt both parties know exists and neither can figure out how to settle. He said he had thought about driving to Portland and simply arriving. He had thought about calling Marcus and saying just, "Come to Scottsdale." He had thought about writing a letter. He had done none of these things. He had done what he had always done with the things that mattered most to him personally, which was to manage them from a distance, while telling himself he would address them when conditions were right. He said, "The conditions are never right. I have spent my career making conditions right. I have restructured deals, renegotiated terms, managed risk, created conditions where there were none. I cannot apply any of that to this. This is not a deal. There are no conditions to create. There is just me, call in my son, without a plan, without leverage, without anything to offer except whatever I actually am. And I do not know, after 67 years, whether what I actually am is enough for him to want." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Simone is 4. She doesn't know me. She will not remember these years. But she is 4 right now, and in 3 years she will be 7, and in 6 years she will be 10. And I know how fast those years go because I watched them go the first time and thought I would make up for it, and didn't. And I am not willing to watch them go again." I asked him what he needed to take the first step. He said, "I don't know if Marcus wants me there. I don't know if I have earned enough goodwill to spend. I don't know if he has been waiting for me to call, or if he has made his peace with my absence and built his life around it and will be disrupted by my arrival." He paused. "But I think those are questions I have been using as reasons not to call. I think the real question is just whether I am willing to make the call, not knowing how he is going to answer." I asked him if he was. He didn't answer for a moment, and then he said, "I think that's why I finally let the phone ring." I told him what I believed, which was this: that Marcus had watched his father from across a distance for 38 years. That Marcus knew what it meant when his father showed up, and what it meant when he didn't. That the call would not undo anything. It would not purchase what had been spent. But Marcus was a man who had become, by his own effort, the kind of father who gets on the floor with his daughter. And a man who builds that in himself does not do it without hoping, somewhere, that the original wound can eventually be acknowledged, if not healed. I said, "Marcus is still there. Simone is still 4. The years you are describing have not happened yet." Curtis said, "No, they haven't." And then he said he should go. He thanked me. He hung up. I sat with that call for days. I still sit with it sometimes. I think about Marcus in Portland, on the floor with Simone, fully in the room. I think about what it cost him to become that. I think about Claire at the wedding reception, finding the right moment to say the necessary thing to a man she had just met. And I think about Curtis, sitting in Scottsdale, $5 million in the account, and the phone in his hand. Finally having let it ring once. Learning, at 67, what it feels like to call someone without leverage, without a plan, without knowing the outcome. Just calling. Just saying, "I am here. I know I have not been. I am here now." I do not know if he made the call to Marcus, but I believe he did. I believe Tuesday morning in late November was the day Curtis finally ran out of reasons to hang up. And I believe Marcus answered. I have to believe that. Because Simone is 4, and the years ahead of her have not happened yet. They are still possible. All of them. Still possible.